Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I am very, very happy to have so many participants today join us for this joint presentation between Every Child California and our ECE Voices program in partnership with California Head Start. So we'll be starting in just a moment or so. Excuse me. If you want to take the opportunity to utilize the chat, and you can put your name and where you're coming from, what your organization is in the chat if you would like to. Please feel free to say hello to other folks who are on the webinar with you today. And we will be utilizing the Q&A functionality for any questions that anyone may have. So again, just taking a moment or so to welcome in everyone. Please feel free to say hello in the chat. See that we've got a number of folks in there: Heather, Sandra, Cecilia. Hello, Sarah, Linda. Hello, everybody. So happy to have everyone join us today. So good afternoon. My name is Nina Boothie. I am the Executive Director of Every Child California. And again, we wish you a very, very warm welcome to the joint webinar that we are hosting in conjunction with the California Head Start Association. Every Child California's ECE Voices has a big advocacy platform, and we are going to be utilizing a number of those resources today to really give you some good idea around Advocacy 101 and how to advocate for your programs. Again, please utilize the chat functionality to introduce yourself, and we will be having a presentation, so please use the Q&A functionality if you do have any questions. So again, my name is Nina Boothie. I'm the Executive Director of Every Child California. So happy to be here today. So happy to be here in partnership with the Head Start California organization. And so Melanie, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Nina. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melanie Cottrell. I am the Executive Director here at Head Start California. So happy to be partnering with our friends at Every Child California / ECE Voices on this webinar today. And so glad to see so many familiar names in the chat. Zinnia, Brenda, hi ladies, I see you. And I will see you next week. So for those of you who are signed up to come to our Head Start California Advocacy Day next Tuesday, this webinar is your foundation for your visits. And then next week on site, you'll get more specific information on the issues that we are going to be talking to our legislators about. I could not be more excited to introduce you to our presenter today, who is so knowledgeable and has so much information to share with you, Justina.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to be able to share this information with you, and I'm happy that you're going to be participating in the Advocacy Day on the 12th. It's so nice to be able to get so many providers to the Capitol to talk with the legislators about these important issues. So today we're going to be going over some basic information and then some more specific information that's going to be relevant to your visits when you go to the Capitol and to the swing space. But we're just going to start with the basics with how a bill becomes a law. And then we'll go over a little bit of a review of committee hearings and some legislative visits. We'll spend some time, a little extra time on this because that's what you're going to be doing next week. We'll talk about a little bit of some advocacy methods that you can use. And then I'll leave you with some resources. So we'll make sure and give you this presentation and any links that we feel like will be useful for advocating in the future as well. So we'll go ahead and get started and talk all about bills. So let's first talk about how the legislative cycle works. So legislation or bills work on a calendar year. So that starts in January. That's when all of our legislators come back to Sacramento and they set up shop at the Capitol. And this is when we start doing our advocacy days like you're doing next week. So California runs on a 2-year legislative cycle. That just means that they hear bills for 2 years before they restart again. We're currently in the second year of a 2-year cycle. So they're talking about bills that were introduced in 2023. When this ends and concludes in 2024, they're going to start brand new with some new bills. And it's kind of interesting that they reuse those bill numbers. So you'll see those numbers again if you ever track bills. So the odd number years are the start of the 2-year cycle, and the even number years begin the second year of that cycle. So just a kind of a trick to remember how that works. So bill hearings, which, bills are what become our law, they start through in January and run through June. So that's when you see a lot of advocates running back and forth to the Capitol and the swing space going to those hearing dates and doing testifying and the Me Too statements for any of the bills that they're supporting. They take a break during the summer and then they're back at it, and then they're going to be back in their offices starting around September until the end of the year, because by then the governor has those bills sitting on his desk and we're waiting to see what his decision is, whether he's going to let those go through or veto those bills. And the beginning of January is when those new laws will take effect. The budget cycle runs differently. It's on a fiscal year. So just to quickly run through this, summer through the fall, you have the state departments developing their budgets. Like they're wanting to maintain their services. They're figuring out how much money they're going to need during the next fiscal year. You have the governor working with the Department of Finance, and he's figuring out his budget for the year. When he releases that on January 10th, the Senate and the Assembly start working on theirs as well. They all need to come together eventually to agree on this budget, but during this time, from January to about mid-May, you're going to see a lot of budget committees and subcommittees having their hearings. So this is when you have advocates like us going to the Capitol saying, we need funding for these programs for providers. And in June, the legislative leaders and the governors meet to discuss any outstanding issues, and by the 15th is the constitutional deadline for the lawmakers to pass that budget bill. Anything that's not related to the budget and support bills or the trailer bills. And then the new fiscal year begins on July 1.
Justina, I'm so
Yes.
sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
We just want to make sure that we have the Spanish translation turned on. So just want to make sure.
Yes.
Okay, I see that it's coming in now on my end. So just want to make sure that we've got that going.
Are we seeing in the chat that it's working for those who need it? I know that
there it goes now. Okay, perfect.
Okay,
All right, just wanted
good.
to make sure. Apologies for the slight delay, and Justina, apologies for the interruption.
We want to make sure everyone's getting the information, so thank you for checking on that. Okay, so back to the basics on what is a bill. A bill is basically an idea that anyone can have. A citizen can bring forth to a legislature and say, I really need this change to happen. And a legislator will say, you know what, I really agree with you on this, so I'm going to go ahead and author it. And they have experts in their office that will write that up. When they write that up, it is now official and it's going to go through the bill process, which we'll talk about committees, but it needs to be talked about and it needs to be hashed out, right? So a lot of places like the ECE coalition that we all sit on will come together and either support or not a bill and make sure that we have experts that are giving their information to the legislature on what the bill means and what the effects it's going to have on providers. So like I said, it starts with an idea that anyone can have, goes to the legislature, they have to support it for it to go through the process, and they draft up the language. They are assigned a number. This is important to know because if you want to follow a bill, you need to know the bill number, and I'll show you a resource towards the end of the presentation of where you can find it. But if it's an assembly bill, if it starts with AB for assembly, and if it's a Senate bill, if it starts with SB, which is Senate bill. After a bill is introduced, it's going to go to a committee called Rules. Rules decides where's the best place for this bill to be heard. And you want it to be heard by the people who have a special interest in that area. So for a lot of ECE bills, it's going to go through Education and Human Services policy committees. And it's going to stay on its site of origin, meaning that if it's an assembly bill, it's going to go through the Education Committee, it's going to go through the Human Services Committee on the assembly side. Once it gets fully through that committee, if it makes it through each one, it's going to switch the sides of the House that it's on. It's going to go through that entire process all over again before it can make it to the governor's desk. So it's quite a long process that it has to make it through. So one important part of a bill that I wanted to share with you that can give you really important information is a bill analysis. This can be found on a state-created website called the California Legislative Information Site. This is the site where you would put in the bill number, so AB, and then the number of the bill, or SB. I have AB 596 pulled up here just so you can kind of see what it looks like when you're in the system. The reason I'm showing you this is because when you have a bill analysis and you see there's one here from the Assembly floor, from Human Services, from Education and Appropriations, you can open it up and it'll list all the supporters. So if you've sent in a support letter and you want to make sure that you're actually officially listed, you can open up the analysis and see that your agency name is listed as a supporter on that bill. So now that we've talked about how a bill becomes a law and some hearings, let's talk a little bit further about committees. So committees exist both in the Senate and the Assembly, and they consist of senators and assembly members who have special knowledge or special interest in particular issues. So ours are going to be consist of those who are very interested in early childhood education or education in general. So bills that have a fiscal impact will go through appropriations. That just means if it's going to cost the state money, it needs to be heard in the Appropriations Committee because they deal with the money side. So I wanted to give you some examples of our standing committees. Like I said, appropriations for anything that has a price tag on it. And then you have budget committees, and ours go through Education and Human Services, just like for bills. And you have Education and Human Services both on the Assembly and the Senate side. So for an advocacy note to kind of tie this back to advocacy, these are the standing committees and budget committees that ECE bills are generally sent to. So if you want to do a deeper dive and follow them, you would follow them on the Assembly and Senate websites. So now we're going to do just a quick brief overview of the budget. So we talked about the important deadlines of the budget and kind of how that works. But every year a new state budget is created, and it kind of establishes a framework for public funding and public service systems for California. And it also kind of shows where California's priorities and values are. So the goal is to promote the well-being of the lives of Californians. And you can see that the budget affects things like schools and childcare and healthcare and college costs, housing costs, and very important departments within California that affects families. So the governor works with the Department of Finance to create the budget for the fiscal year. And he introduces that to us in January. He works on that throughout the year, and he releases another one in May. So here in a couple months, we'll see a revised version of that come out before it's finalized. The budget works through the Assembly and the Senate. They'll both create their own, and then they're going to work together to make sure that they're coming to an agreement on those numbers. So the budget standing committees, move my pictures out of the way here. So like I said in the previous slide, the Senate and Assembly create a budget plan which sets their priorities. The Assembly and the Senate and the governor come together, and they're going to discuss that because they have to work out any kinks that are in it, and they have to compromise on what each of them wants. And as they're going through that process, they're figuring out trailer bills, which is basically how they're going to implement those funds policy-wise in these different areas. So it's going to go through these subcommittees, and these are the ones that we use that I have listed here. And I just have that an advocacy note is you can attend those hearings, or you can call into them and say that you agree or disagree. So let's talk about advocating for budget and legislative bills. This is where we're going to spend a little more time on the next few slides because it's really relevant to what you're going to be doing next week. But going to a hearing, you can do a couple different things. You can testify at a hearing, and if you're testifying, you're going to get an invitation to do so. It's not going to be a surprise. You're not going to show up to a hearing and they're going to call you up front to do a long speech on a topic. You're going to be prepped beforehand by the legislator's staff. You'll have time to prepare talking points on very specific issues that they want you to talk about. And I always tell people, if you're going to testify, even though you might have up to 3 minutes, go ahead and pare it down just in case they're running out of time, so that you can do a concise statement within a couple minutes. Be prepared to ask questions. And this happens after the legislator presents the bill to the committee. They'll call you forward. There's a difference between testifying and Me Too. So if you're new to advocating, a Me Too statement is anyone who wants to, from the public, that wants to attend a hearing. You'll go and you'll watch it. When they talk about the bill that you're interested in, at the end of it, they'll say anyone that's in the audience or on the phone that supports or opposes can come up and talk now. That's when you would get into a line at a microphone up front, and you would just state your name, your agency, and that you support or you oppose a bill. They won't let you talk about anything else. If you really are passionate about a bill and want to state all your feelings about it, you would need to put that in a letter to send to the committee. So legislative visits are so important because it lets them know how important these issues are to their communities. So I always say, if you're going to meet with a legislator, make sure that you're their constituent, because they will listen to you if they represent your communities, because that's who they work for. So you want to let them know right off the bat, my name is so-and-so, I work at this agency, and I am your constituent. And then you can meet with legislators who sit on important committees that we work with, like education committees and so on, to push, a particular issue that's going to be going through their committee. But I think the most important thing to know is to meet with your legislator that represents you and your community. You can always meet in the Sacramento office, but you can also meet them at their local office or have them come to your agency when they're off session and they're back home. So we're going to go over what it looks like when you meet with the legislator. So they each have their own office within the Capitol, and a lot of them are right now housed in the swing space, which is about a block away while they're doing some construction on the Capitol. When you enter into their office, there's someone sitting there. I'm just kind of walking you through so you can visualize what it's like, because a lot of people are brand new at doing this and have no idea when you walk in what it's going to be like. And I know that I liked knowing every step of the process. So when you go in, there's going to be someone there at the front desk that will welcome you to the front office. You let them know who you are and why you're there. And you want to make sure that you've set this meeting up beforehand, that they're expecting you, because the staffers are super busy, the legislators are super busy. Also, their staff offices are very small. So it's so important when you set up these meetings to let them know how many people are going to be there, so you can be in an appropriate space that fits all of you. Typically, my rule of thumb is if you have 5 or more, you're probably going to need to be in a conference room. So give them that heads up. When you set up the meeting, you want to let them know what the topic is about so that you're meeting with the right staff person. You don't really want to show up unannounced. I mean, some of us do it sometimes, but you're probably not going to get a meeting if you go in unannounced, or it's going to just be real quick. You're going to drop off information. You want to come prepared to the meetings. Melanie will give you all of this information before you go to your advocacy day, where you're going to leave documents with them. It's so important to leave that with them, because they need that to review after you leave. And a lot of times you don't meet with a legislator, you meet with their staffer. Their staffer is going to write all of this up for them, like a report, letting them know all the important information that you gave them. You want to make sure that part of the documents that you leave with them is your contact information, because you're going to become the trusted source of information for them. You're the expert on this. So if they have questions, they can reach out to you. And then answer the questions that you know. And I can tell you from a lot of advocacy trainings I've gone to, they have always said, if you don't know the answer, just tell them, I don't know the answer, but I'll get it for you. Because you want to become a trusted source of information, they want to know that if you don't know the answer, you're going to be honest about that. And then just find the answer for them. There's going to be one of your peers, Melanie, someone within, your peer group that's going to be able to answer those questions. And it's better, gives you a chance to follow up with them anyway. Send them a quick email. So, and I always put a little caveat on here to be prepared for things to change quickly, because things at the Capitol and the swing space are very fluid. So things change for the legislators and their staffers, schedules change, times change, rooms change. Just be very flexible when you go in there and know that things are going to be moving quickly and you might have to adjust your plans a little bit. Okay, so I want to touch base on legislative staff because this is so important. A lot of time legislative staff are there longer than the legislator is. And so it's so important to make these connections because they're going to be your go-to. Sometimes people feel like, oh, I just met with the staff. Don't feel slighted if you meet with the staff. They're just as important. They really are the frontline communicators with the community. And I've had them specifically tell me every email, every phone call, every meeting I take, I write a report and I give it to the legislator. So tell them everything that you want the legislators to know, and they will get that to them. They often manage the schedules for the legislators. They give counsel to the legislators. So they're super important to get to know and make as your go-to connection. Okay. So let's talk about when you're at the meeting, kind of some etiquette and how to make it flow really well. When you first go in and meet with them, you just want to introduce yourself and make sure everyone that's in the meeting with you is introduced to them. Check in with the staff member or the legislator on their current level of knowledge. This is a topic that was brought up by one of our lead advocates with ECE Voices. She said it's so important to go in there and kind of understand where they're at with their understanding of ECE programming, because then you know where to start. So if they don't have much information, you're going to want to really fill them in on all the details. But if they already are in that and they're understanding it more, you can kind of get into a deeper conversation with them. So tell them where you work and the topics that brought you in. Basically, what you want to do is share your personal story. And that's where it becomes super easy as an advocate, even if you're a new advocate, because these are your stories, these are your experiences, and it really connects with them. And what I've found at sitting in with these meetings when you bring providers in is they have some experience. They're going to share their stories with you. You really make a real human connection with them on the topics of childcare. I've had a lot of staffers talk about, their childcare experiences, the families they come from. So you're really crystallizing what might be very abstract to them so that they can fully understand your needs in the community. If it relates to their legislative priorities, like if Melanie gives you some information and she tells you you're meeting with this senator and their number one priority is ECE and maybe it's Reyes and they've got a bill going through, then you can bring that up. You can say, I read your bill, and I know it's going through and we support it, and share that with them and connect on that level. And then again, to reiterate, leave your contact information. So important, because you want to be able to follow up. They need to be able to follow up with you as well. So I want to go over some resources with you. I think that having these resources helps you feel less dependent on other people to fill you in on information. It's, take it or leave it. You don't have to use it, but it's kind of nice to know it's out there. I touched base a little bit on this earlier, but the California Legislative Information website is where you can find bills. So if you see one that really catches your attention, you can type it in here where it says bill number, or you can do a keyword search and look up, providers of childcare, early education, just do a keyword search. And then you can actually follow it to where it'll send you an email and say, hey, this is going to a hearing. You can look at who the authors of the bills are. You can look at amendments to it. And what I think is most important are those hearing dates if you're someone who wants to attend those hearings or call into the hearings and do a Me Too statement on there. So the next most important websites, I believe, are the California State Senate site and the California State Assembly site. And the reason I'm saying that is because you have access to every senator. You have access to every assembly member. You also have access to every committee that we talked about today and subcommittee. You'll know everyone that's on those committees. And then you have every agenda and hearing that's coming up available for you to see publicly. And as you can see on this one, it says on the top, public testimony phone number, a phone number and an access code. So, without that information, how would you be able to participate in advocacy for a particular bill? So I think it's good to just keep those handy and check them out every once in a while to see if there's something that you want to support. And then lastly, I have the California Legislature Position Letter Portal. So California works a little different from some other states where they allow you to just send in a support letter saying, hey, I support this bill, to an email address of a staffer. They really have an organized system where they want you to use this website, and you can send in a template letter. So let's say Melanie sends out a letter saying we're supporting this bill and here's, just put your information in it. You would go to this website and submit it that way. And it goes into a folder for the legislature, the legislator who is authoring this bill, so that their staffers can see who's supporting the letter and why, or who's supporting the bill and why. Once you sign up for it once, you don't have to do it again. When you go in there, it walks you through, you type in the bill number, it tells you exactly where it's at. You don't have to guess. So if it's an education committee, it'll tell you this is going to go to education committee. And then you have a history of the letters that you sent in. So if you're wondering, did I send that in already or not? You'll know because it'll show you that you did. Okay, we went through this presentation pretty quick. So let's talk about this and we'll go through some questions and answers. But what I wanted to cover is advocacy starts when you want to change, right? And for us, we usually want to change through laws and state funding. And good advocacy starts with knowing where to find the information and resources. So hopefully it's been helpful today to learn about bill tracking websites and the Assembly and the Senate site and how to turn in a position letter through that site. I know I sent out an email before this, and I'll send one after that has links in it that you might find useful on how to, a deeper dive on how to use these. Finding your representative is something that we have on our resources page, and we have a toolkit with training recordings. I know for sure that that's one I sent out this morning to everyone. So you can feel free to click on those to look through the toolkit. What's nice is that it actually tells you when the support letters are due by, so you don't have to guess. And then advocacy is easier with a network. So when you're part of Head Start California and you're part of ECE Voices in Every Child California, you have support in a network that can help you on your way with advocacy and provide you days like advocacy days and with information and training and toolkits, so you're not figuring out on your own. So I highly recommend being involved with as many as you can be. And then advocacy is only effective when you take action. So kudos to all of you for March 12th, to getting to the Capitol and being able to meet with your representatives and sharing your personal stories with them. That really does make a difference. I was at a meet and greet with Eloise Gomez Reyes, and she said, these things don't change on their own. It wasn't just some legislator's idea. She said it only happens because the community comes forward and speaks, their story and their truth of what's happening in their communities to enlighten them on what's going on so that they can start to help and assist make those changes. So follow the bills and the budget hearings that matter to you, submit letters, call into hearings, and testify if you're called upon. And then join Advocacy Network support letters and go to advocacy days. So that is my 2 cents on all of that. I want to make sure that I give Melanie and Nina plenty of time to also jump in and share their experiences and stories with you.
Thank you so much, Justina. I do have a couple kind of boots on the ground tips I'd like to add, and maybe you can help fill in these for me as well. But for our Advocacy Day next week. So first, I want to make sure that when you are planning to go to your visits, if your meeting is at 1, make sure that you are on your way to your meeting at least 20 minutes beforehand, maybe even a little bit earlier, so that you have time to get through security in the building and to get to the building. You may be meeting in the Capitol. More likely you'll be meeting in the swing space. The swing space is just down the block. It's not very far, but you will need to give yourself time to make the walk, to get through security, and then to find your appointment. And if you're in the swing space, the elevators in that building, for some reason, are very confusing to a lot of people. So make sure you give yourself time to figure out those elevators as well. Instead of there being a button on every elevator, there's a touch screen. You tell the touchscreen which floor you want to go to, and then it will tell you which elevator will take you there. The elevator itself does not have buttons and it does not say where it's going. So you have to pay attention to that touchscreen to figure out where you're going. We do have a limit of about 5 people per visit because the space is so constricted. And I know that some groups are bigger than that, so we will have to be strategic in who comes to what visit. You'll see in your interactions with staff, as Justina mentioned, you're meeting with staff, and that is a good thing. Staff are so useful and resourceful. Staff are also often very young, and sometimes that's a surprise. Don't be surprised by that. They are young and they are super smart and capable folks in the Capitol. We talked about leave behinds, and I dropped in the chat. I'd also recommend that you bring artwork from your kiddos in your program to leave as a gift, or your program's annual report, or any other documentation that you have that really celebrates how many kids you serve and all of the ways in which you serve them. You know, one thing that we encounter at the state level is that Head Start, being a federal program, sometimes gets kind of overlooked by our state legislatures. And so one of the really important goals of doing these visits is simply to raise understanding and awareness of all the great things that Head Start does for the state of California. And then finally, if you are coming on March 12th, keep an eye on your email tomorrow and the next day. We will be sending out more logistical information and the recording and handouts from today's session. So you'll want to be sure to take a look and read those emails. And that's what I wanted to add. Nina, what do you have?
Those were all wonderful additions. Just a few other things about logistics. Depending on which building you're going into, you have to take your laptop out, or if you have an iPad, you do have to take those out. It is not as strict as going through the airport, so you do not need to take your belt or your shoes or what have you off, but just be prepared that they will ask you to take your laptop, or if you have an iPad or some other device off. You also have to take everything out of your pockets. In both the Capitol as well as the swing space, there is a place to get coffee and some snacks, but be aware they don't have a full cafeteria in either of those spaces too. You are allowed to bring in water bottles, some snacks. So if you need that, please be sure to take care of those needs. And lastly, I would just say that when you go and you do these legislative visits, if you are meeting with a staffer or you're meeting with the legislator themselves, remember that they want to hear from you. You are the experts in the programs in which you run, and they want to hear your stories. They want to hear from your experience. They're not going to ask you for things that you do not know about. Or if they want some more data, all you have to do is say, I would be happy to follow up with you. And then you either follow up with Justina, Melanie, or myself, and we will be sure to get all of that information to you. Again, they want to hear your stories. They are so excited every time someone goes in really talking about their program and their story. And so just want to be encouraged. I see that there is a comment in the chat from Sandra that it's not so much a question, but a little bit nervous of sharing your story or your testimony. And I would say, honestly, exactly right, Sandra, that there is, do not be afraid of sharing your story, that there is no wrong way or right way to talk about your experience, either with Head Start, CSPP, or as a parent. Absolutely, be mindful of the time. You usually will have only about 15 to 30 minutes. So just be mindful of your time when there are others there, so that, your story does not take over the entire time. And again, they just very much are excited to hear from you. If there are any other questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A section. And if not, I'm just very excited for all of you. I know sometimes it can be a little bit intimidating to go the first time, but you will be with others who have done this many, many times. And I know that you will have a very, very wonderful experience. So for those of you who are seasoned, who have done this many times, thank you again for going back to the Capitol. Always really appreciative to elevate all of our early care and education programs. If you're brand new, kudos to you for going out on that limb and, telling your story. We hope this will be the first of many times that you will be able to do it. And again, just very, very appreciative of all of you being here. Melanie, we do have one other question in the chat that I think is more appropriate for you. Just a little confusion around the specific advocacy points. So I know that you will have the packets ready. Would you mind just touching upon just the talking points specifically from Head Start California for your day? That would be wonderful.
Absolutely. So although Head Start is federally funded, keep in mind that we also have to comply with state rules and regulations. And 75% of our Head Start programs are also running with some sort of state funding. So the state doesn't always realize that their rules and regulations are also impacting our Head Start programs. The one specific thing that we will be really hammering on this time is associate teacher permits. So for those of your programs who have teachers working with an associate teacher permit issued by the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing, as it is right now, you get that permit for 5 years. And then you can renew it once more for 5 years. And that's it. Then you cannot renew it after that. You can only have your associate teacher permit for 10 years, despite the fact that you are still qualified and doing the job. All right, so for our programs that are subject to the state rules, which is most of them, that is a challenge because what happens when those associate teachers' permits expire? They can go on to the next level if they do the education, but that requires a lot of general ed that folks don't necessarily want to do. So what I hear from our programs a lot is that we are losing those associate teachers when their permit expires. And we already have a big enough workforce crisis. This is a silly problem to have. So our main focus this year is really trying to push through legislation that will get rid of that 10-year limit on associate teacher permits and let folks with those permits continue to work in our programs as long as they continue to renew their permit every 5 years rather than having it expire. And we love this bill because it is a no-cost solution to a significant problem. And it keeps qualified people in our classrooms, which is exactly what we want for our kiddos, right? So that's the kind of issues that we see with the state, even though Head Start is federally funded. Because our funds are blended, braided, and layered, we are oftentimes still subject to state rules and regulations. And that's another reason it's so important for us to continue to raise that awareness, because the state legislators just think, oh, this only impacts us. Well, no, it impacts Head Start too. So we need to be top of mind for them. I'm glad that was helpful.
And Every Child California is very much behind this bill as well. We are a co-sponsor of this particular piece of legislation. So again, it's a really wonderful partnership. I do see that an individual has raised their hand. Eduard, did you have a question you wanted to ask? If so, I will go ahead and allow you to talk. So please go ahead.
Sorry, I just clicked the wrong button.
Oh, no worries whatsoever. It happens to all of us. No problem.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Anyone else have any questions? Oh, Melanie, we're being asked, what is the bill number for the associate teacher permit?
It is AB 1930, authored by Assemblymember Reyes. And when we're on site next week, we will be going into more detail on that bill.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? These were all very, very good questions. All right, well, I am not seeing any more. So a very, very big thank you, Justina, for going over that incredible overview. And just on behalf of everyone from Every Child California, just thank you all for being here. And Melanie, I will turn it over to you to close out the session today.
Well, thank you again, Justina, for all the wonderful knowledge and information that you shared with our attendees today. I think we are well prepared to go into meetings next week. And thank you to all of our attendees for being here. I look forward to seeing you in Sacramento on Tuesday morning. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye, everybody.